Hello guys, welcome to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, we will start the story of what if Issei was betrayed and becomes the Knight of the Shadow Part 3. Judeca, it seems Igris is very stubborn, she said as you nodded as they look at the knight. Nero, he began to turn to look at the throne. As he looked at Igris, the throne stopped protecting the seat of my father, who has left, and try protecting me, the son of Sparta, who is in front of you. Arise. And just like that, the shadow began to shin on Igris, as Nero had grin while Judeca gen shine while you touch Nero back, while looking at Igris. The knight standard right in front of them in a shadow form. Igris walked towards Nero and began to kneel in front of Nero as they see Igris' new appearance, a large knight with a light blue glow, jet black armor covering him from head to toe, a tattered black cape, and a long red hair-like ornament extending out of the back of his helmet. Nero, let's get my army settled up, and just like that Nero went back towards the other knights and mages and extracted their shadows. 1 hour later, Nero and you went back to the room filled with chairs as Judeca instructed to stab her in the middle of the circle. Just like that, the circle started to glow and restart a new recording. That reveals half of the members of the Liberators only, leaving Oscar looks like an old man, as well as Melusine, who looks like an old woman now, and Haltina and Diane Lead, who still look young, but have freckles on their faces, showing them getting older. As Nero and you notice that Militia was no longer there. Oscar, hello again, this is our second recording. As you can see, a few members are no longer here. I believe it's time to tell you what happened after we change history, and just like that the story began again. When the Liberators started to restart history, they made the new era around medieval time. Everyone in the world does not know about magic anymore, nor the supernatural. Thanks to Sparta's sacrifice, the world was brought back to peace again. But around this time, Lucifer began to fall, leaving Militia more distraught after losing all her daughters, who decided to fight the underworld, leave behind 3 first-generation angels, leaving her only with the second-generation angels as they started to become more isolated, but still help the world as best they could. As for the Liberators, they started supporting humanity in the shadows, even around the time of King Arthur era. Meanwhile, more events happened, causing some of the second-generation angels to fall and become fallen angels. Problem kept coming up one after another. And then Trinity wasn't able to contain her blood anymore, leaving Militia to seal her friend away and call her Trahexa, and calling her the Beast of Apocalypse to ensure no liberates her until a cure can be found, as 2 of her daughters made sure to keep watching of her in the seal, leaving only one of her first-generation daughters. Sadly, this reduced all her power, and she had to participate in the 3 war factions, leaving Militia to kill her own child Lucifer and seal Delia and Albedo into sacred gears. This left her with no strength and retreated back to heaven, heavily injured, and crystallized her final first-generation angel to support the son of Sparta, and her name is Noint. Nero was surprised but not too sure on trusting an angel again after Irina and Gabriel, but you can't judge someone if you never met them. And not to mention, the first-generation angels are supposed to be strong in pair with gods, so she would be a great ally. Heaven. Michael and Gabriel, accompanied by Irina, Griselda, and Dulio, were following behind Raphael up to the 7th heaven, where the sacred gear system and God system, also where the God of the Bible once resided in heaven when she was alive. But above the room was a crystal that holds one of the most powerful and first-generation angels created. They weren't the only ones to arrive. There was a bunch of other angels, as they all look at the crystal that was shining red, then going back to blue before shattering and exposing the angel within the crystal as she slapped her wings. As the crystals fall from the sky, her beautiful silver hair float in the air as she finally reached the floor. Her attire is an outfit which consists of a white sleeveless dress, which has metal plates covering both sides of her waist, as well as a winged helmet on her head, gauntlets on her arms, and graves over her legs. She began to open her clear blue eyes. I've been inactive for how long, she spoke. Her beautiful voice sounded so majestic, but her expression was nothing but an emotionless expression. Michael, it's been so long, Sister Noint. We have passed to a new era after the Great War, but I am glad to say that we have finally achieved peace. Noint, I see. She didn't say anything else, she just looked around her surroundings, seeing all the angels, until she'd been hugged by Gabriel. Gabriel, I'm so glad to see you. Sister Noint, I'ma show you everything that you've been missing, she said with a happy smile. Noint, I'm afraid I cannot. This surprised everyone in the room as they all let out gasp. I have an important mission that does not involve all of you. And these, she took a minute before looking at Irina and all the reincarnated angels. These fakers. 1. Michael, sister, that's pretty rude of you. Please have more respect by everyone around you, he said to calm down the situation. Noint, sorry, but I speak the truth, she said, tilting her head to the side. not knowing if she said something wrong. They are not even in par against second-generation angels. This comment made Irina angry. Irina, hey, we are devoted followers of God and chose to become angels. You can't just think of us below you, she said, angrily pointing a sword against her. But then, gosh, she let her scream as feathers began to engulf her. Annoyed so how Irina pointed her sword at her and thought of it as a declaration of war, and she did not hesitate on sending her wings filled with disintegration to scar her. All the angels gasp in horror after seeing Irina, beat up form and scratch marks as she fall to the floor. Everyone rushed to help her as Noint watches, as she felt her body resisting against something. Gabriel, Noint, by the divine order I order you to cease your attack, she said. Ultimately this caused Noint to stop. The reason why Noint is because she's an angel with no feelings and only thinks of orders. The highest order is a divine order that God and the Sarah can command other angels. Noint follow these orders, although she does have the ability to not do those orders, but for a person who has no feelings, no emotions, she has never thought never doing those orders. Although she was the very first-generation angel to experiment, meaning she tried different things which was rare for first-generation angels. Noint, disengaging was the only word she said. Although her mind thought of something else, her mission, the last mission of their mother, become the guardian angel of Sparta child, she stayed put, believing that she'll find him very soon. Nero and you. Haltina, now since you know the true story, this time we tell you about the calamities. Now Nero and you were paying attention included Nero's shadows and Judeca. There are 5 calamities. The first one is White Titan. It is a powerful creature that will destroy humanity with each passing step. Nero and you began to wonder how to defeat this giant, and I know what you're thinking. How do you defeat a giant? Well, the only weapon that can help is Excalibur, which sadly is back at the Lady of the Lake. Also, the Excalibur, you know in your history that the church has, is a fake made by Merlin himself. Now Nero felt the pressure. The only weapon capable of destroying that thing would be Excalibur. And the Excalibur, they know, is just a fake. Oh great, just great. Sadly, the only way to have Excalibur would be having fairies assist, and yes, they do exist. Sadly, they're not the most kind of fairies, you know. Sorry if I ruined your childhood. Nero couldn't believe fairy exist, and they were cruel. Damn. Melusine, the next one would be Cathpalic, also known as primate murder. But you mustn't worry about him, because that to an ally. Cathpalic has turned into a familiar by Merlin. Its appearance is now a squirrel creature. Nero and you sighed in relief, knowing that one of the 5 calamities was dealt with and turned into a familiar. Horonic. Oscar, next would be a calamity. You know Mundus currently he's sealed and cannot escape. But this doesn't mean his followers can get out. Be ready to fight his followers and devils. Nero had a smirk. That's what his business is for. Devil May Cry, a business to kill devils. Dianlead the fourth is known as 8 thunder gods. They're beings that come from another world. They are highly powerful. And not to mention they have an army. How many we do not know, but we recommend you to gather allies or at least have weapons for anti-army. We do not know much about the 8 members of these gods, nor do we know if their strength, so be cautious and check on the dimensional gap. If the portal is open now, this one was troubling 8 members of Piece of Calamity. That's gonna be a tough opponent. Not to mention the army they have is unknown, including their strength. And what's worse is they have to watch the dimensional gap. This is just great. Nero knows Office and Scarlet will be lazy and not watch it. Haltina, now then the last one is something pretty strange. Its name is Sessioin, and what she plans to do is the world. Nero and you froze up when hearing that. Yes, it's just like I said, she wants to eat and swallow it in her hole. Currently, her location is unknown. What we do know is that she immortal for now. Nero and you wanted to hit something. Do you think the last beast is a that literally wants to the planet? Dear God, what is the world turned into? 5. Oscar, now we're near the end of the recording. Once the circle is done, you'll be obtaining the 7 great magic we possessed. Please make sure to adjust yourselves comfortable. All this information will overload your brains, but with this magic, you'll be able to surpass your limits. Now I think it's time for Dianlead to speak some words to his niece, and just like that, the rest of the members have disappeared, leaving behind only Dianlead, who began to scratch his cheek, not knowing what to say. Dianlead, Alacia, long time no see. I wonder if saying that is a little wrong. I think that you are surely hating me. No, surely word like hate will not be enough at all. What I did, that's not it. This is not what I want to say. Even though I have been thinking of various things, now that the time has come to leave my last will, I cannot speak smoothly. While making a self-depreciating wry smile, Dianlead pulled himself together by clearing his throat. That's right. First let me say my thanks. Alacia, surely, right now on your side there should be someone who you are trusting from the bottom of your heart. At the very least, that person must be a strong person who could obtain power and able to challenge the labyrinth, a person who didn't abandon you from the guardian that I prepared and rescued you. Nero felt like someone was watching him as he looked again at the projection, if it really a simple recording or live, as he could feel that Diomedes was looking at him. Diomedes, you, child of Sparta there who is close to my beloved niece. For Alatia, what kind of existence are you? Are you her lover? Are you her friend, or do you become her family, or her comrade? I apologize that I cannot meet you directly to say my thanks, but I still want to say it no matter what. Thank you for saving this child, for being close to her. Thank you. I offer you my greatest gratitude in my whole lifetime, he said with a bow. Nero, who was feel relieved as it's just a recording, tightly his embrace on you, who was leaning her body towards him. Diomedes, Alatia, surely many questions are flooding inside your chest, or else perhaps you have already know the truth. Just why, that day, I hurt you and buried you inside that bottom of darkness. What kind of existence are you, and who is looking for you? He said with a serious face. The reason was that you was born as a Myco and she was aimed by Mundus. Diomedes, who noticed that, pretended to kill you in his rebellion with the disguise that he was blinded by greed. He then sealed her in the abyss. The room where she was sealed itself was a hidden place that could fool even the gods. The sealing of you was also a bitter choice for him, so that her presence couldn't be possibly detected even for a bit. Diomedes, I was hesitating whether to tell you the truth or not until just before that day. But, for the sake of deceiving our race with certainty, I judged that I shouldn't tell you. I also thought that if you hate me, then that would be a motivation for you to live. Surely Diomedes also couldn't stay for long in the sealing room. That was why, after pretending to kill you at the palace, there was no doubt that there was also no time for him to talk with her. Just how filled with bitterness that choice that he made, it was shown by the strength of his hand clutching at the image. Diomedes, even so, it doesn't change that I had hurt you. I won't say anything like your forgiveness after this late. However, I want you to please believe only this. I want you to know this. His expression changed from anguish into an expression of smiling while crying. That look was overflowing with gentleness and kindness. At the same time, it was also filled with a hopeless sadness. I love you, Alatia. I love you from the bottom of my heart. I have never thought of you as bothersome, not even for once. I thought of you as my daughter. You, uncle, Diomedes-sama, too thought of you like a father. That feeling was flowing down along with the tears that traced through her cheek, unable to form into words. But the strength of the hand that was clutching Nero's hand conveyed that feeling more than anything. Diomedes, I'm sorry that I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry that I couldn't do anything but to entrust you to someone in the future. I'm sorry that I act like a pathetic father. What was in front of their eyes was a recording of the past. It was nothing more but Diomedes' last will. But such thing was irrelevant. You couldn't help but yell no matter what. Something shining was gathering at the corner of Diomedes' eyes, but he didn't let that flow by any means. While enduring tightly, he spun words toward his beloved daughter with all his heart. Diomedes, I wanted to be at your side, seeing your figure when you grasped your own happiness someday. It was my secret dream to punch the man standing at your side once, and then after that, I wanted to exchange sake with him and say please take care of my daughter. It was the partner that Alatia chose. Surely, he would make a firm promise with a serious face. Diomedes was looking at far away as though seeing a dream at the other side of the image. By any chance, there might be the you of the past at the direction of his gaze. It will be the time soon. There are more things that I want to talk, various things that I want to convey, but our artifact cannot last any longer. You know, I don't wanna. Ajisa, Oda-sama. Diomedes smiled wryly at the approaching limit of the recording, to that you reached her hand while crying. Her uncle, no, her father's deep affection, and that tragically tough resolve fiercely shook Yu's heart. Indescribable feelings were overflowing out. As for Nero, there was a bit of tears in his eyes. Diomedes, I cannot be on your side anymore, but even if this life is about to run out, I'll continue to pray. Alatia, my beloved daughter, I wish for infinite happiness to shower above your head, for you to walk a path that is warmer than sunlight, and gentler than moonlight. You, Oda-sama. Nero hugged her close. Diomedes' gaze wandered. Surely that was because he was imagining the person who was being close with you. Diomedes, to you, child of Sparta, who is very close with my beloved daughter. It doesn't matter what kind of shape it is. Make that child to be the happiest girl in the world. Please, I beg you. Nero, naturally. I swear it with my life. There was no way Nero's words reached him, but, without any doubt, Diomedes was smiling in satisfaction. Surely he was convinced of how the person in the future who listened to his words would answer. In various senses, he was a preposterous person. Perhaps it was just as expected from Yu's father. The recording was fading down. Diomedes' figure melted into empty air. It was as though his soul was going away. Nero, who could feel that you cannot take it anymore? Diomedes sayonara, Alatia, I wish that the whole world that is surrounding you to be filled with happiness. He said his last word as he completely vanished in this world. Inside the room, a crying voice echoed to the outside the room. 30 minutes later. After 5 minutes of crying, their heads began to hurt. With such an overloaded information of the ancient magic they have received, causing them to pass out. Nero, he starts to groan. Gra, that really hurts my head. I'm really glad they told us about that. You alright? You are Alatia. You, I'm alright, but call me you like I said. I don't need my name anymore. Because it's the name you chose for me. Despite eyes being puffy, she gave a nice smile to Nero. What are we going to do, Nero? She asked, extremely curious after all this experience they have been through. That maybe Nero goal changed. Nero, well, of course, we're going to deal with those calamities. No one's going to hurt humanity in my watch, he said quite calmly. Also, I'm not going to help those idiots of the Allies factions. I do not have the slightest intention of being the pawn of them. But it's not like I'm gonna abandon humanity or the people that supported me. Only the people that I have an attachment to. I'll protect them and keep them safe. Does my decision bother you? This is the new Issei now called Nero. He'll protect the ones he cares about. Everyone else can just go themselves. He'll also protect humanity since he's part of humanity. And the factions think they're weak. Well, time to show them. My home is where you are. I don't care about any other place, she said, refusing instantly since in truth she only cared about being with Nero now. She wants to focus on her own happiness like her uncle said. Nero, I see. I'm glad, he said with a smile. We now have new magic from the age of the gods, he said with a smirk. But we don't know how to use them, she said, not understanding how to use them. Juda, if you wish to learn how to use the ancient magic, then I can teach you, spoke the sword, all of a sudden shocking the both of them. Nero, are you serious? Nero said while raising the sword up in the air. Juda, of course master, I can properly teach you and Diomedes' daughter how to use creation magic, gravity magic, spatial magic, restoration magic, spirit magic, evolution magic, metamorphosis magic and finally concept magic. She said all the 7 magic and what they were. But how will you teach us to use that type of magic if you don't have a physical form? She asked, since having a teacher is great for them to learn this type of magic, but they won't know how to cast it without seeing it. Nero, oh yeah, do you have a physical form? He began to wonder since Delia had a physical form. Juda, yes, I can take any form you wish master, she said with a sweet tone of voice. Nero, so what would you like as a human girl? He was very curious about it. Juda, I'm rather bussy, she said calmly but very seductive. Nero, are you serious? Show us, he said, wanted to see how she looks like while you was glaring at him. 1. Juda, if that is what you wish master. And just like that Juda began to glow, causing both of them to be surprised. As the glow continued it died down, revealing a young slender woman with large bosom, dark skin and long white hair, as well as some short pointed ears. Her attire consists of a white short one-piece dress that exposes her shoulders, back, and hips, as well as opera gloves and thigh boots with Neapolitan cuffs. Nero was godsmack at her beauty. She surpasses Delia by a mile away. The most noteworthy thing about her was her eyes that were a beautiful purple. Juda, what do you think master? She smiled watching their expression. Nero, I thought your sword form was awesome and beautiful, but your human form is also beautiful and elegant. This comment made Juda have a blush on her cheeks, but it didn't change her automatic face. I'm surprised by your appearance, she said, noticing her pointed ears and dark skin. You're a devil, right? Juda, yes, I'm a devil. Now I'll teach both of you on using ancient magic, she said as both nodded on the learning this magic. Time skip. They began to train under Juda, take her lessons on the ancient magic, mastering them, and use concept magic that breaks reality. Currently we can see Nero relaxing on the hot open bath after remembering his training, as well as have Sparta blood inside him mix with the fallen human heat named after eating monster meat, while discovering the weapon the liberators created, and new weapons he created, as well as having a special ring, while also writing a letter to Sitvera about his current situation and seeing Ryudameru new look. Flashback. We can now see Nero testing the ancient magic to master them and be able to use concept magic, but now we're seeing Nero testing metamorphosis magic as he turns his left arm into a dragon before sighing. As the memories of him begin, the red dragon emperor flooded into his mind as Nero looks at his right arm and having a smile. Nero, hey Juda, is there any way for me to revert back to being the son of Sparta? He asked while looking at the person in question, who was watching Nero while also checking on you, who seemed to create a thunder dragon. Judeca, there is a way, do you wish to know of it? She said, look at him to make sure if this what he really wanted. Nero, yeah, I want it back since I lost it in death. Judeca, you need to stab yourself with rebellion and hold me to remove unnecessary DNA. 1. Nero, you what? Judeca, it's the only way for Nero to awaken his lock powers. But it's your choice, she said as Nero thought about it before nodding. Nero, let's do this to get what I lost. Are you sure about this? She said, worried for Nero's sake. Nero, this is the only way and I'll do it, he said, holding rebellion with one hand while looking at Judeca. Judeca, it's time to turn you back into what you were before, she said, turning into her sword form and to be held by Nero. Nero, look at you, as he starts stabbing himself in the chest with rebellion as Nero fell to the floor. As you look with shock on how Nero stabbed himself, and observing how the blood began to flow from under Nero and began to form a puddle as Judeca lanyard stab his devilbringer wrist and start to glow. Suddenly a strange pulse ran to rebellion that after a slight red flash changed the appearance of his grip a little. After this, the aforementioned sword was forcefully expelled from its owner's body while the blood around Nero burst as if it were a geyser. From the aforementioned geyser came Nero, who gave a punch to the air. Judeca, the demon you carry inside is finally awakened, she said as she released her lanyard as she turned back to human form and watches Nero along with you. Both Judeca and you saw how Nero took a few steps as he exhaled air with force, noticing how around the body of the aforementioned appeared a kind of white energy. After seeing that, they both covered themselves. Watch as Nero, who felt as the inside of his body a new power was beginning to awaken. Nero, he exclaimed forcefully when he could not stop that power that had quickly traveled and saturated his body, without noticing how his appearance had a demonic aura around him for a few seconds, while some circles with engravings in another language were expelled from his body, disintegrating into the air. After a few seconds, Nero's appearance changed back and fell unconscious to the ground on a puddle of his own blood. You was worried about Nero, but Judeca stopped her and only said to wait until he wakes up. Slowly Nero opening his eyes as he found himself lying on the ground where he had stabbed himself. Getting up with some difficulty, he began to test his new body. While the girl were watching him with different expressions, you noticed how the white-haired man's eyes had changed, giving him a more mysterious, elegant, stoic and manly air. Having her blushed heavily, as Judeca spoke with a slight smile while Nero was gripping his fist. Judeca, impressed, Nero has finally awoken completely. What do you mean, Judeca? You asked, wanting to know what she means. Judeca, see his eyes, she said to you while standing next to her. Yes, they are a beautiful blue eyes like the night, she replied while Judeca nodded. Judeca, that's Sparta eyes color, it's only natural that he has his eyes. He broken all his restraints that suppressed his powers. Nero start to shadowbox. He stopped being Issei Hayadu to return to who he really is, the son of the Dark Knight Nero. The reason she didn't say Nero Sparta is because Nero hasn't earned it or ready for it. Nero gave both of them a smile, as they smiled back at him while the girls who betrayed Nero Issei felt a great sadness because the Issei they knew is gone, now they have to deal with Nero. Nero, I'm going to write a letter for Sikvera and explaining why I'm still here and then go to bed, I'm very tired, he said as you and Judeca nodded of understanding. Nero began to enter the workshop as he takes a paper and start writing a letter as he called Ryudameru, who entered with a portal as its red color was changed into blue as Nero explained to his familiar, as it start to blow its boat whistle as it travels through the portal. As he disappears as Nero rests on his chair as he takes a nap, and when he wakes up he would start to work on his weapon vehicles, golem and gear. Nero cabin. Sikvera was currently reading a letter from Nero that Ryudameru came to deliver as she told this to the rest of the girls who sighed in relief, finally understanding why he was taking so long. Sikvera, that idiot trying to get stronger for our sake. Ria, it's good to know that he's all right, although all he said about the truth of the world really is something hard to believe. Leisha, I must say it is pretty big news, but now everything makes sense, at least some parts the world hides lots of mysteries. Before they could speak more, Sikvera to receive a call, and she began to take out her cell phone and responded. After her minute she began to start turning towards the girl. Sikvera, well come on girls, it's time. Kurumi, what's going on? Section. Sikvera, well Nero new home and business is ready and I think we should go over there and start its design. Don't worry, everything will be covered by me and Leisha, so when he returns, let's greet him in his new house. And just like that, Sikvera and the rest of the girls went towards the building that would be called Devil May Cry that will soon be open for business. Back with Nero. Nero, after finishing his nap, he started working in the workshop and was now transmuting all his weapons and aura that Oscar left behind, as he would explain what he made and they left behind for him. First would be Metzele, a Gatling gun based off a M134 minigun. It has 6 barrels that are capable of firing 12,030mm caliber rounds a minute. The barrels are made out of a special self-cooling ore, but it still only be fired consecutively for about 5 minutes before overheating. In addition, it needs a long time to cool before it could use it again. Next, Orkan a Schilderkarid rocket and missile launcher based off a M202 flash rocket launcher, but with the addition of a 12-round rotary magazine. Next is Pile Bunker, a 2.5 meters cannon that can be held by Nero's Devilbringer. It had 6 arms and a stake that could drill through anything. The stake is made with 4 tons of Azantium and compressed via compression transmutation. It also has anchors to attach against hard enemies. It was later given gravity magic to help increase the power of the stake and had a compact version of the spatial magic spell Void Fissure enchanted into it as well, allowing it to pierce through any defenses. Mechanic Shield, large shield, a 2 meters tall Kaffinship shield. It was made from a mixture of Tor stone and Star ore, and layered with an outer coating of Azantium. It can be held by Nero's Devilbringer and it has a retractable stake that could bury into the ground so that the user would be unmovable when attacked. Crossbits, it has the shape of a large metallic cross which has a middle part, just like a round shield, with a length of 60 centimeters and width of 40 centimeters. It moves by the same principle as the unmanned reconnaissance planes and their type specialize in attacking. Inside were loaded with gun and rifle bullets. They were operated using the bracelet where 7 induction stones were installed. Moreover, the surface was covered with minerals which endowed with diamond skin using creation magic, so they could become strong shields, as they reacted on the mana from induction stone. When becoming a shield, it becomes a huge flower-like cross. It can also self-destruct when the enemy is distracted by its shooting power and acts like a surprise attack. When 4 points were united, a boxa-type barrier would be formed. It's not just a simple barrier though, it's the type that shuts out space itself through spatial magic. Chakram is a metallic rings that 15 centimeters wide and are enchanted with Gale Claw and Hide Presence. It has spatial magic within its ring. Nero can shoot through space with a variety of weapons. It can be controlled remotely through a spirit stone. Hyperion is satellite with a built-in laser and a Azantium spike to release from space, and also shoots a pillar of light with a length of 50 meters and disintegrates whatever it touches. It can be described as a laser beam satellite powered by magic and is a sunlight convergence laser. It is an enormous airframe lens which converges sunlight. It can also charge itself while inside of the treasure trove, which has heat capacity installed in it. Enormous heat which critically overflowed from the treasure trove would be discharged through the launching entrance, where gravity magic was added in to make it discharge towards the ground. Its biggest feature was the fact that it could still converge the sunlight even while it was nighttime. Its secret was due to Oscar Orcus's artificial sun which lit up his rooms, which was created through evolution magic, spatial magic and restoration magic. It has a remote control with an induction stone. Nero found 2 weapons that were left behind, including others, but these 2 Nero decided to keep in his arsenal, as well as built some modifications and even copies of them. The black barrel weapon that he would use in case for immortal opponents. Next would be Incursio, a better armor than Delia. Black Barrel, the gun, is a conceptual weapon of natural lifespan, capable of imposing the notion of limited lifespan into the body of near-immortal creatures. Compost of true ether, bullets fired from the gun will disintegrate all instances of grain and ether they come into contact with, ignoring any parameters of beings that intake either substance to deliver direct damage. The greater the quantity of grain, the more damage will be inflicted upon the enemy, and it is impossible to even hold it unless the body is free of such substances. It was given the nickname of a gun that kills gods. The gun, which is normally a rifle type with a curving buttstock, is extremely versatile in that it can be refitted with a number of different options to allow for use as a sniper rifle, but Nero modified it into a cannon, even made a handgun prototype, story for another time. Demon Armor Incursio, a armor-type Tegu that took on the form of a short sword, with a chain-link tassel in its sealed form. Incursio was created from the flesh of Tyrant, a super-class danger beast. It was a prototype for what would later become Grand Chariot. The Danger Beast's power was so great that its flesh is still alive within the armor, giving the Tegu the title of Demon Dragon Armor. In the past, Incursio once belonged to a high-ranking liberator officer and martial arts expert. Due to its origins as the Danger Beast tyrant, Incursio possessed an aptitude for adaptation and evolution. Aside from its standard capabilities, it continued to evolve as the result of battles against several opponents, gaining new forms and abilities as time goes on. Due to being body armor, Incursio had a near-indestructible defense, with the only thing able to pierce it being other Tegu. The armor also greatly enhanced the user's physical abilities, such as speed, strength, and agility. The users of Incursio were also able to wield a long spear or halberd-like weapon called Noontid, which was capable of cutting through danger beasts with ease. Arachne golem metal spiders be used for infiltration. They could go anywhere through remote control with transmuting and a special adhesive thread that they were equipped with. The images are sent to Nero phone, and it can sense magic traps just like Nero's sense presence. It also has various paralysis and sleeping potions in its feet syringes. He created more project golems, and even created a Gundam that will be a story for another time. His new vehicles for land travel. Flashback end. Nero hot. This feels great, he said, enjoying the hot water that freed him from all that attention he had accumulated in his stay in the dungeon, until another voice was heard. How good it feels. It was heard when you and Judeka entered the bath. Judeka, yes, the bath has been modified to be enjoyed by all the liberators. The voice of Judeka was heard. Nero, I told you that I wanted to take this bath alone. Do you remember it? And Judeka, why are you here? He said, a little annoyed, but he didn't receive an answer as the sound of splashes were heard, and they were swim where he was. I know, but I refuse, she said as she put her head on the left shoulder of the boy, who looked at her a little angry, so as not to get carried away by his instincts. But then the right shoulder, he felt another presence. It was Judeka. Judeka, I am your partner. We must be together all the time, master. Her voice sounded very seductive for a moment. And it was much worse since he involuntarily turned his gaze to see their beautiful and delicate skin, and their cheeks became slightly reddish, giving them a beautiful appearance. Nero, it's okay, you can stay, but at least cover yourself a little. There are a lot of towels, he said, looking away. But he saw her again when she spoke. Nero, I want you to look at me, she said, and this drink a little. Those words drove away his self-control, and if the sacred sword got up. Judeka, master, look at us, she said as they both get up, so that he would look at them, as he tried to repress himself. Nero, Judeka, wait, calm down. I think it's not a good time, he said while breathing heavily, almost dominated by his instincts. Are we not as beautiful as Sakvara? She said, lowering her head. Judeka, don't you like us, master? She said with a sad tone, while Nero noticed the feeling of sadness and insecurity they had, since they each represent painful partners he had. Nero, that's not it, you're both wrong. Both of you are very beautiful. Sakvara is also beautiful. Both have their good things, so understand that I love you both, and all of you are the most important thing for me, he said seriously and sincerely, since he had really fallen in love with both you and Judeka in this time. And when they heard this, they smiled happily, in addition to noticing a certain thing. That makes me very happy, because I only belong to you, Nero. So look at me as much as you want. She let Nero see every corner of her body, one that, despite still being a little youthful, did not take away the instincts that Nero was awakening. The drops of water ran through her soft skin. They passed over her modest S. The drops of water were clinging to her pale and beautiful skin, passed through her small waist, and fell down her small thighs under the eyes of Nero, who could not look away. Judeka, I will never separate myself from you, master, so please enjoy. She smiled, standing next to you, showing her chocolate skin enlarged that had water between them. As Nero gulped some. That day Nero released all his, and for the rest of the night, only Yu's and Judeka's screams of pleasure were heard. Fortunately, only the three of them live in that mansion, so that didn't represent any inconvenience. Many hours later, the three slept in bed completely naked. Yu and Judeka slept peacefully with big smiles next to Nero. After a few seconds, Nero woke up. At first he didn't remember well what had happened, but it only took a few seconds for him to remember the long and pleasant session he had with Yu and Judeka. Nero began to wake up and look at the both of them, and remembered Sakvara as a thought came to his mind. Nero, I got something to fight for now, and I'm not gonna let anyone take it anymore. Whoever stops me, I'll kill them. Last day of the month. We can see Nero and Yu and someone else behind them were near the magical formation that was near the gate, and began to activate it to be able to return to the surface while they held hands. Nero, we will finally get out of here. Gave his groan as a nod in addition to having a smile. Nero began to remember the enemies that are waiting for him outside old and new, such as the calamities he must fight in Mundus, not to mention the two last weapons left behind from his father Sparta Yamato and Force Edge, not to mention the traitors they would probably want to take away his weapons. Nero, we're gonna have to face a lot of challenges out there. Those stupid calamities, the liberators did all they can, and now it's up to us. That's how it will be. Nero, I will protect you and you will protect me. We will defeat everyone who gets in our way, he said seriously as he sharpened his gaze. Because we are the strongest. Juda, we are all a team. We will protect each other, she said in her sword form necklace. Nero, we're going to show the supernatural that humanity has a protector now and we're coming home. Said agreeing. Nothing will stop us, master, the voice of a certain person behind them commented. Nero and you smiled as Juda just let out a glow from the gem. Now it's time to face all of them. At that moment the magical formation was activated as Nero flashed and disappeared from the Sparta Labyrinth mansion. Nero, whoa, the place looks nice, he said as everyone looked at Nero with happiness as they hugged him as he hugged back. Sikvera, we miss you a lot, Nero, she said before stealing his lips. Meanwhile all the girls stared with jealousy before looking at each and nodding. After Sikvera finished her kiss, Nero was dragged and kissed by Kurumi, Leisha, Ria, and lastly you. Sikvera was surprised by you, but then Nero necklace glowed revealing Juda as she wrapped her arms around Nero neck before kiss him. Sikvera, Nero, you got some explaining to do right now, she said as Nero nervously chuckled before explaining. 5-minute explanation later. Sikvera, I see you're having a powerful vampire, and you discovered who you truly are, the son of Sparta. This is a lot to take in. It's hard to believe that you're related to a legend and the story of the calamity. And are you serious that one wants to the planet, she said, trying to understand what the heck he found out down there. Nero, like I said, that's all I know. And I know it's very hard to believe, but I've become the son of Sparta. Well, actually I kind of died, so I went into a reincarnation, he said, not too sure how to explain this better. 1. Ria, so does that mean the ice we all know it was just a fake, and imitation? She was wondering if that means that all this time Nero was just a fake. Kurumi, I don't think so, think about it, sure he may be the son of Sparta now, and could have become it later in the future, but he's still Ice and Nero, she said, believing that. Leisha, but anyways it's good to have you back. We all missed you, she said, showing a delicate smile. Nero, yeah, it's good to be back anyways. What's the situation with Ash? He said he wanted information on. What's he doing right now? Sikvera, currently nothing at all, just spending time with your ex-partners, although he has been leaving quite often, but then the next second he comes back sometime with different face expressions. She was thinking about that detail especially. Nero, different basic expressions. Okay, something's not adding up. I thought it was him, but if he keeps changing face expressions, then something's clearly different. Anything else? He said, wanting more information. Leisha, well, I believed he is messing around with not just your girls, but even the ones who are married, she said with a little bit of disgust. Nero, what the leaders haven't even catch onto that they're goddamn idiots. Well, there was that time that Graphia came in to wash my back when she was drunk, he said, remembering that time, and felt pretty suspicious how she just casually came in. But the moment when he said that, all the girls stared at him. They all looked at each other before nodding. Sikvera, Nero, I don't think it's time for you to think about that. More precisely, you have returned, and I am quite thirsty, she said, looking at him. For some reason Nero started to shiver, before looking at his surroundings, and noticing the women's gazes. He wanted to escape, he wanted to teleport, but for some reason he could feel his spell being cancelled. You ain't running away this time, it's time to have the night of our lives, she said, licking her lips. Juda, master, you're going to need to satisfy all of us tonight, and probably tomorrow and the next day before we go to that mission in Fortuna, and also look for your father's weapon tonight. You better prepare your stamina. Nero, mind, oh father, give me strength. And just like that in the city, you could hear endless moans into the new building name, Devil May Cry. Quite literally are crying not out of fear, but of nice action, and for that, I leave it to your imaginations. Heaven. We can see Noit looking at the night sky as she was told to go take a stroll around heaven as she thought what Gabriel said. Noit, you have changed, Gabriel, you are no longer that girl who mother decided to put her faith on, she said, remembering what Gabriel told her. About this person Ash, the person she claims to love, but she can tell it's a lie. That person holds nothing but dark intentions. And the person she betrayed Issei Hayadu, she could only wish for him to find happiness. She does not understand what love is, but she knows that Gabriel does not understand it very well, and because of her inexperience, she lost her true love. She only wished that things went differently. But that doesn't matter anymore. What matters most is her mission to be the guardian angel of Sparta. Her last mission, she will not fail. 9. I wonder what you are like, son of Sparta. 1. Devil May Cry. In the morning we can see everyone up and feeling like their skin was glowing. While Nero was in his sit that girls gave him as Sakvara approached him along with Kurumi, who gave a paper to him. Nero, are you serious? Protested the white-haired boy sitting with his feet on his desk. Just yesterday I came out of the Sparta labyrinth, and now the situation at Fortune gone unbalanced for the report 8 months ago, and now have demonic weapons like mine. Sakvara, it's not just that, Nero. I may not know what their plans is, but from what I read, I know it will be a worse disaster than what you experienced. She show actual photos of the situation may getting worse. But the necklace around Nero neck spoke. Judeka, there are invoked the devils through the second portal that connects the human world with the demonic world, she explained. Nero, and how are you sure that they will make their move now? Kurumi, I know because the contact I have in a clone in the city and told me a few hours ago things are getting strange, and my information comes from Ingvild. That comment surprised Nero that Ingvild is in Fortune. Her message to my clone was that order plans to gather the devils to transform them into their soldiers, and after that she left and went home asking for you, Nero. She said, observing how the Nero let out a sigh of defeat. Nero, it's okay, give me the magic circle and me, Kurumi and you will go kick there and come back soon, he said, extending his hand, waiting for his girlfriend to give him a paper with a magic circle, so he can teleport there faster, like the other faction forces. Sakvara, unfortunately, this time you will have to ride on Ryudameru, since teleportation circles has been removed in Fortune, so only way to travel is by vehicle or fly. Also it help you in going in with stealth, she said as she wrapped her arms around her boyfriend neck. So you'll take Ryudameru, go to the port of Fortuna, it's about 2 days. I hope you are ready, Nero. Nero, he smiles as he kissed Sakvara cheek. Don't worry, Sekshin, I'll be okay. I have Kurumi, you and Judeka with me, he said as Sakvara resigned as Nero went to prepare his things. Being the son of the Dark Knight had its advantages, but the work sometimes became heavy, since he had barely had to be lazy. But Ingvild there, so there a positive side, maybe he would find Credo or anything interesting in that city. Doctor's lab. We can see the mysterious laboratory together with the doctor. Loki and Ash watched the video film of Fenrir entering Fortune and then disappeared in sight, as Loki was angry that his child was being controlled by LaFay, who let go to complete a mission so impossible that it still haven't been completed. Loki, we need my son back since his fangs are important, he said, not worried about his child, only on his usefulness. Doctor, that's right, we must get a sample, I need that fang, he said like a child wanting a toy as Ash smiled. Ash, then let's send one of the experiments to capture him. This comment made everyone silent as the doctor checked the information before realizing that Beast is complete as he looks at the two who nod. Doctor, now Beast, we order you to capture Fenrir alive. Kill anyone that comes into your path, he shouted as he opened the test tube. The sound of giggling can be heard as the eyes of Beast can be seen as she had the eyes of a predator. Beast, let's have some fun, she said as she giggled while walking past everyone who were scared. Ryudameru. After fixing his things, Nero said goodbye to his girls. He left with Kurumi and Yu and took in Ryudameru onto the sea. Nero entered the luxury captain cabin that Ryudameru had as he took a few minutes to relax. After a while, Nero went to the bow of the Ryutamer too, enjoying the sea breeze. Judeka, master, she said from the necklace. Nero, I know I'll have a big fight there soon, and to think Ingvild there, I'm coming. Ingvild, just please wait for me, he said, but some taps on his shoulder made him turn around and give a smile. Right in front of him were Kurumi and Yu, who gave a reassuring smile to him as he smiled while Nero pointed his finger towards the direction of Fortune before making a sign of a finger gun for make a bang. Somewhere in a street we can see a beautiful girl looking at the stars as a shooting star flash in the sky. This girl was none other than Ingvild Leviathan, who was smiled as she that star, and knew his coming as she was then called by 3 people, 2 brown hair boy and girl, along with a girl with red hair, telling her to come inside. Ingvild nod as she followed after them before looking back at the stars. To be continued. Haha, just kidding, let's continue. 1. Fortune. Checking his things, Nero found a small gift that Leisha had given him for his trip to Fortune. It was a new outfit that she made for him because his current dress was already very worn out. Looking at the new suit carefully, he was quite satisfied. Note Issei's new suit is the one from Nero from Devil May Cry 4, so I won't give many details about the suit, since I assume everyone knows it. Taking a look at his bed with a big smile, observing the two naked beauties who slept with a sweet smile on their faces, moving with as little noise as possible. Taking his things, Nero left the cabin, closing the door with great care, heading towards the deck of the ship from where he contemplated the small port where he had arrived. The port of Fortuna City. Looking at the sky, Nero saw how it was already getting dark. Taking out his phone, Nero noticed how he had slept a lot. But he didn't complain. He had an incredible time. At a slow pace he got off the boat, and after following a few signs he reached the city. But as he entered he could notice how there were several subjects dressed in white uniforms with a hood and helmet that covered their faces, carrying swords of quite striking design. Normally he would have killed them, since he recognized the emblem that was in their uniforms. They were members of the organization, whose plans could cause another disaster, like the one his father had managed to avoid by sealing the underworld. Returning to the subject, Nero couldn't kill them since that would attract attention, and they would know that there is someone in the city stalking them, so they would be much more alert. So to make sure no one to recognize him, he used Incursio armor. Taking a big jump, he landed on the roof of a building and began to move towards the city's great cathedral, whose design was the one that stood out the most among all the buildings present. But when he was approaching the cathedral he heard very familiar noises to his ears, the sounds caused by a fight. Looking through the edge of the roof of the building, he saw a young man with brown hair and green eyes, apparently 16 or 17 years old. The aforementioned young man was fighting against a new species of devil. Their shape did not look like any enemy with whom Nero had seen or fought before. Their bodies were irregular in shape and seemed to be made of fabric attached to each other with a terrible seam. Although there was a detail, most of them had a sword attached to one of their limbs, replacing either an arm or a leg. Nero watched the boy's movements funny. It seemed his having a good time, and knew how to use the sword quite well. After a few more minutes the fight ended, and the young brown hair began to run at full speed in the direction of the cathedral. Everything indicated that the boy was late, but the question was late for what? Nero only limited himself to observing the cathedral, since as he remembered the leader of this organization was an old carcamal who in front of the public was a kind of priest, but who adored a devil Sparta. The job was simple: go and kill the grandfather, look for a sword in question, but there was something in that goal that caused him some unrest. If the goal was so easy, why did the factions had so many problems, and couldn't kill him? Any supernatural could have completed the work. Easy to send an army, then they were defeated, and not to mention Leface and Fenrir, but nothing. Nero, this will get interesting, he murmured as he continued to advance through the roofs. Fortune Cathedral. Nero had finally reached the roof of the cathedral, where there were multiple stained glass windows that served as a skylight for the interior of the cathedral. Observing through them, he was able to appreciate the situation. Wherever Nero looked it was an ordinary church, with the exception that instead of worshipping God, they worshipped his own father, as if the aforementioned were a god. The only problem in his opinion was the fact that the church as such was the most boring. If Nero had to go to it like a normal person, he would either listen to music or end up shooting himself. Although on second thought it wouldn't work, since he tried to shoot himself hadn't died. But he didn't come to hear that church, at least not to hear it precisely. Observing those present, Nero located his target. It was the old man who spent them as a priest, dressed in white clothes. Nero watched for a few more minutes until finally all those present bowed their heads as a sign of prayer. Nero, time to act, he murmured as Nero broke one of the crystals under his feet. While descending quickly, he fell on top of the altar, right in front of the old man, who looked up when he noticed that he had something in front of him. Nero pulled Schlag and pointed directly at the old man's forehead, pulling the trigger without glances, leaving as the only warning of the attack the sound of the shot that caused everyone to look at the altar. Observing the back of Nero as he slowly turned towards those present, allowing them to see how Nero's left cheek of the Incursio armor was stained with the blood of the old man, who was now lying on the floor. The whole place was plunged into a deep silence. His Eminence exclaimed, a brown man of about 35 years old wearing a white uniform and black boots, drawing his sword, followed by those who seemed to be his armed escort. Nero was surprised to see this man he knew, named Credo, a brother and father figure to Nero. The members of the escort wore suits similar to what Credo was wearing, with the difference that they had hoods that covered their faces, in addition to wearing metal helmets. Nero was looking funny how all the civilians ran for their lives. Nero was amused by the fact that they thought he had them as objectives. If that had been the case, they would not have been able to even get up from their seats. before their heads had rolled on the ground. As Nero looked at those present, his eyes crossed the green eyes of the young brown-haired boy who Nero had seen before reaching the cathedral. The aforementioned young man was in front of a girl of about 18 or 19 years old, as well as having some he-loving Vold Leviathan. Smiling in his armor, Nero saw in front of him a group of about 10 men armed with swords, who were preparing to attack him. Making a jump, he attacked with a downward kick, hitting one of his adversaries in the chest, sending him to fly away from the place of the battle. Listening to how the subject landed heavily on one of the many wooden benches that were in the place, blocking a downward cut from his back, kicking his attacker. Due to the impulse, the attacker flew out against one of his teammates, causing both to fall to the ground. Turning his gaze, he saw how one of his fallen opponents tried to stand up. Stepping on his enemy's chest, he stuck the blade of rebellion in the person's torso, causing a small stream of blood to jump when the steel cut the flesh. That whole scene was observed by the young man, who began to guide his companion and Ingvald to the exit as quickly as possible. Nero took one of his attackers by the shoulder, turning him towards him, sinking his faithful sword in the center of the chest, observing how the steel blade came out on the other side. Lifting his sword with the man still glued to it, starting to hit his companions with the subject's body, and once he had knocked them all down, he turned on himself, sending the man to crash into an area of the wall that was several meters high. Without wasting time, Nero ended up with the two enemies he had left, beginning to approach Credo, who was on his knees on the floor behind the altar, holding the old man's body in his arms. Credo, exclaimed the brown girl, starting to run in the same direction where Nero was moving. One of the hooded subjects who was still alive stood up, trying to attack Nero from his back, but he only blocked the blade of his sword with his own, and due to the difference in strength, the subject was fired a few meters backwards, stumbling the brown girl, who fell to the ground right in front of Nero. The girl was frightened as she saw how Nero looked at her, but Ingvald was behind her, trying to pull her up. But due to fear, the girl could not move. As for Ingvald, look at Nero gaze, that didn't give any bad intentions, but rather get out of her, he tried to say to both of them. But take this, exclaimed a voice that came from one of the sides of Nero. Nero, what he looking in that direction, but had two boots which seconds later were kicked against his face, making him fly several meters until with a turn he landed on the hands of a statue that assumed was a statue of his father, but he did not look anything like his aforementioned father. The young chestnut took a race, and with a jump he placed himself in front of the Nero, both on the statue. Bisara, the brown girl exclaimed worriedly as she stood up. Bisara, Kiri, go with your brother, Ingvald, and get out of here, replied the chestnut, without taking his eyes off the white-haired man. Credo, I'll be back with help, you stall him until then, he exclaimed, throwing a sword at Bisara, who took it without problems, and after that he went out with his sister and her soldiers. Bisara, take your time, he murmured, but then he saw how Nero disappeared from his line of sight. The next thing he felt was how he lost his balance. Looking at his feet, he knew the reason why he had lost his balance was Nero in his Incursio armor, who had used a sweep of legs with such a speed that he did not have time to react. Suddenly Bisara felt like he had something above him. Looking up, he saw how Nero attacked with a descending cut. He unconsciously blocked the attack with the sword that Credo had provided him, but he could not help falling through the space that the statue had between his arms and chest, bouncing against the sword that held the statue and against the front of the aforementioned statue. Using his leg, Bisara managed to stop halfway, watching as Nero was standing on the back of the statue's hands, which were resting on the handle of the stone sword. Applying force with both legs, Bisara managed to separate the sword from the statue, tearing the hands of the aforementioned statue from the rest of the sculpture, dropping the sword with a Nero standing on the tip of the handle, with Rebellion resting on his shoulder, and his other hand in the hips of his armor. Bisara began to run through the blade of the large stone sword, which due to its inclination to fall, was able to perform such an action, attacking Nero with a frontal thrust. Leaning back a little, Nero evaded the Bisara attack. Both contenders jumped in opposite directions while the stone sword went on its way, destroying part of the place. Both Nero and Bisara fell face to face, but with a distance of about 7 meters between them. Bisara, what's the point of carrying such a sword, if you're not even going to use it? He asked, a little annoyed because Nero had barely used his sword to attack him. Faced with that complaint, Nero decided to give him a pleasure. If he wanted him to use his sword, then he would do it. Throwing himself forward, Nero began to attack Bisara with a combination of diagonal, ascending and descending cuts. Although his attack pattern was not too varied, what he was achieving was quite favorable. With each attack that Basara blocked, he retreated ground due to the difference in strength and speed, that continuous rhythm, until with one of his attacks Nero tore the sword of Basara with an ascending cut with his rebellion, leaving him unprotected. Moving forward with a frontal lunge that was looking for Basara's chest, the aforementioned put his right arm as a shield in an attempt to prevent the sharp steel blade from touching any vital part of his body, but when the tip of rebellion reached Basara's arm, an intense flash invaded the place. Flash. Flash. Nero, so you kept an ace in your sleeve, he commented amusingly while observing how the Basara right arm was covered by a silver metal layer. Basara, I thought the cat had eaten your tongue, he said, gasping air slightly. But if what you want are tricks, well, take a trick, pulling Nero away with force, but the aforementioned did not suffer any kind of damage. Tilting his head slightly, Nero evaded the huge stone sword that had been thrown by Basara. Looking at the aforementioned, he could see how Nero wiped the dust from the palms of his hands. Basara, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to finish this before the cavalry arrives, he declared while taking one of the many swords that were lying on the ground, and that at the time belonged to those who tried to attack Nero. Fortune Streets. While Nero fought against Basara, the girls who slept inside Ryudamera, which Nero had used to reach fortune, gradually began to wake up when they did not feel Nero next to them. Kurumi, have we arrived yet? She asked as she rubbed her eyes. You ice, she said, looking for her beloved Nero, observing, like the rest, how the room shone by the absence of Nero. There were also no traces of Nero's guns or sword. That meant that he had left without telling them anything, that in a way that bothered them. But they knew that he did it because Nero didn't want them to get hurt. Although they had to talk to him about him treating them like glass maidens that would break at the slightest moderately strong air breeze. Kurumi, Nero must have gone to fulfill the objective of this mission, so it shouldn't take too long. But from what I can hear, there is a lot of fuss, she said while she sending her clone from the darkness to investigate the surroundings. That only means that Nero has already started. I think Nero forget about stealth when in Labyrinth, she sighed when she remembered that Nero stopped being stealthy after reaching the surface. Kurumi, I have sent one of my clone from the darkness to look for Nero. We will meet with him in this place, she said, creating a holographic map of the city of Fortuna, pointing out what seemed to be the top of a tower, which was in a complex of abandoned houses and buildings. We'd better hurry. Both nod as they quickly began to look for their clothes to leave as quickly as possible, since in addition to wanting to meet with Nero as soon as possible, they had to be ready in case their help was required, even if Nero has Juda assisting him. Fortune Cathedral. Massaging his shoulders, Basara let out a sigh of fatigue. He had finally murdered the person in armor. How had Basara done it? At a moment that he took advantage in the fight, and after hitting his face repeatedly, he threw him against the statue of Sparta and then threw him at rebellion, making the aforementioned sword pierce him from side to side, leaving him nailed to the statue, suspended a few meters high. But when he turned around to leave the place, it was when he heard a voice. Nero, it's not bad. Upon hearing that voice, Basara quickly turned towards the statue where the armor man lay dead, observing how the aforementioned began to move. I may have even underestimated your abilities, he said as he separated, with some effort, from the statue, with rebellion still crossing his torso from side to side, landing in front of Basara as if nothing. Basara, you aren't human, are you? He asked, since Nero in front of him was standing with a sword piercing him, causing him a wound that by force had to be lethal. Nero, in most cases I would say that we are the same, he said, removing his sword from his body in them. He looking at the men he had killed being imitated by Basara, observing how those men had extremely dark skin, almost as if it were burned, pointed teeth, and their eyes had no sclerotic or iris, they were only two orbs that seemed to be made of pure fire. Seeing that appearance, Basara approached to look a little closer, since it was the first time he saw one of those soldiers without their helmets, and never thought they looked like that. Nero, although I suspect that in addition to not belonging to the same class, you have something that differentiates you from the rest of the people, he said, sitting on the edge of the hole he had made in the ceiling to enter. Basara, what are you talking about? He asked, looking at Nero, hiding his surprise, because he had only diverted his sight for a moment, and then Nero, who was next to him, appeared on the ceiling. Nero, very soon you'll find out, but first, I have a couple of unfinished business, he said as he stood up, standing on a firmer ground than the ceiling. Bisara hey, he exclaimed, throwing the sword which he had borrowed to where Nero was, but the set object was nailed near the edge of the hole through which Nero had entered. Nero adios Kitty said goodbye with a fun tone, since despite the fact that Bisara was a few years younger and probably in the same age, he did not know anything and lived, ignoring the existence of very dangerous creatures, and in that in Nero's opinion made him a child. They're done. Sorry guys for taking too long, but I have an announcement, and that is, I'm putting this story on pause, sorry, but won't be make the next chapter, until I feel like I'm ready. I'll still continue the Fate story. Now this is Hajim0 signing out. Thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Don't forget to support author and his story, link in the description. Sayonara, see you in the next